Hi there and welcome to Aqurus Solutions. Today we're going to cover off one of the biggest buzzwords on the market, digital transformation, or DT. Digital transformation has three components associated with it, which are all mandatory for successful DT deployment. Tools is one of those factors, and although most already know that software or hardware are considered tools, we're going to focus on the not so obvious and how implementation methodologies are tools that are just as important, and then I'll finish off by comparing my Agile versus Waterfall methodologies with my famous puzzle analogy. So, what is digital transformation? Digital transformation is using technology tools such as software or hardware, for instance, IoT devices, to increase your company's efficiencies by at least a factor of 2. Three components are people, processes, and tools, and all are dependent on each other. You cannot successfully deploy DT with one or two out of the three. All of them are required. So with our focus being tools today, let's dive into implementation methodologies. Agile and Waterfall are both very common tools on the market, but what are they? Agile is a phased implementation approach, managed in palatable components with small wins every few days or weeks or months. And in software, you would see this as perhaps going live with a few things first and then turning things on later if they're not deemed critical. So we go live with your most critical needs, perhaps division, entity, or core functionality, whereas Waterfall is requirements are defined as more, linear, with the requirements defined at the beginning and then worked on throughout the life cycle. Comparing this to software would be starting with everything on the table and then working towards the same goal and then cutting over all at once. So each methodology does have its place. Waterfall we tend to see in more rudimentary projects or if a business is incredibly organized, which honestly is quite rare. And Agile we'll see when we have many moving components such as MRP, CRM, add-ons, field tickets, or multiple companies, streamlining with the most critical needs first and then turning them on piece by piece, where your solution then eventually starts its ROI calculation and you'll start seeing value even though you're still going through an implementation. So let's use my puzzle analogy. The rule of thumb is to always start a puzzle with a puzzle's frame. But is that always the case? So let's look at puzzle 1. A nice clear image, organized, structured well. Waterfall would work great, and all the pieces could be put on the table as we work towards completion, starting with the frame and then working our way through everything listed out until it's complete. It's quite manageable and it's very much incrementally working towards the same goal. However, let's move on to my 18,000 piece Ravensburger world map that my father and I completed. A few risks that we had before we even opened the box were, we have to block off an entire room in the house for its entirety until its completion. There's lots of dedication required for this. It'd be very time consuming. Where would we assemble such a beast? And did we even have a wall big enough in the house where the puzzle could proudly hang? So upon initially opening the box, we were relieved to see 4 nicely bagged sections comparable to a solution vendor giving you a nice solid plan and setting you up for success. So let's get started. Here you can see that my father and I started one of those 4 sections. It was late fall, so we were able to use the patio table, and our deadline was spring when my mom needed it back outside again. So opening the bag is comparable to creating your own DT team. While we sorted and organized our pieces, this would be your DT team documenting business requirements and prioritizing your critical needs. And then table and room were our resources, as well as my father and myself, that were allocated to the puzzle and its creation. You'll notice our furniture is pushed aside and then also pushed in the corner to create space and room for this beast. So with each section sizing in at approximately 4,500 pieces, the puzzle was already very difficult, so we needed a plan. The rule of thumb is to start with the frame. Well, that wouldn't really make sense in our case, as it was 3 solid gold rows on the 2 outer parts and 1.5 on the inner parts. So this is where the puzzles would join together, and this was the complete outer layer. So we have these pieces that are in progress on the left, where we streamlined towards circles. We focused on the inner circles and that's how we built it out. Whereas the one on the right was based on the linear patterns that were on the map. The images at the top over here were actually deployed last. So representing that each phase prioritizes different needs. Again, starting with the front frame made no sense. There would be zero value, just as in business solution deployment. Starting with a waterfall methodology and not focusing on core needs results in a much larger ROI timeline and return. So we continued the agile approach after the unravel. We did not start with the frame, as it would result in no value for the puzzle, aka business for the time being, and it would be redundant. We did not combine all the pieces together, as this would probably have failed for a few reasons. Motivation would be lost entirely. There would be a tremendous amount of frustrations, and headway would be completely unclear. So with 4 separate packaged pieces, we had a clear direction. We focused on the critical needs in each section, aka phase, starting with the core needs on each phase, which essentially increased the efficiencies in the project as we continued on and on, which resulted in our small wins of value. We saw positive results with our small wins. We had great momentum. We saw our success in the light at the end of the tunnel. So the puzzle was finished on time before the spring came, making sure my mom had her table back outside and that the furniture had been put back in place upon completion. So just because normally you start a puzzle with a frame, it's not always the case. Here you go for 4 pieces of the 18,000 Ravensburger puzzle. I hope you've enjoyed this video on Agile versus Waterfall, and if you have any questions, as always, reach out. Thanks.